Today we are going to talk about cortisol and menopause. I'm Dr. Shelley Meyer. Thanks so much for being here. And if you're coming back, thank you for coming back. I appreciate you being on my channel. Either way, I'm a functional medicine doctor, registered dietitian, and a woman that's gone through menopause and perimenopause. So lately I've been focusing on this channel. I've been on the platform of YouTube since 2019, gone through a lot of different topics of gut health and hormone health and gene health and detoxification and all kinds of functional medicine topics. But lately I've been focused more on perimenopause and menopause. So that's what we're focusing on today, the relationship between our stress hormone, cortisol, and the stages of perimenopause and menopause. If you need to know any more about those other topics, check out my other channels. And then this topic I've covered as far as menopause and perimenopause in a lot of detail in the last 4 or 5 months and some videos before then. I also have a blog called perimenopause.help that you can check out too if you don't want to take notes or want to dive deeper into some of these things. So let's dive into our cortisol hormone, our stress hormone, and how that interacts with estrogen, and then how it plays a part in perimenopause and menopause symptoms. So just to review, I have full videos on this, but perimenopause is the years leading up to menopause. And that could be starting in your late 30s, early 40s, late 40s, early 50s, somewhere in that range. And then menopause is when you've gone a year without a period. So that's that day that you've gone a year without a period. That's menopause. So you can have your hormones doing a lot of crazy things during this time. So perimenopause, you can have stages, like I've talked about in my videos and my blog. Stage 1 being, the progesterone during both stages is gradually kind of going down. And then you have the estrogen going up sometimes in the first phase and creating this estrogen dominance kind of piece. So I'm going to focus on that a little bit on this video and how that relates to cortisol. And then in the stage 2, where you have estrogen coming down too, you get more of that classic menopause, postmenopause symptoms, which are like night sweats and hot flashes and sleeping problems. But you can have some of those in the earlier stages too, and mood changes and brain fog. I just did a full video on brain fog, so you can check that out on the channel. So those are kind of the definition of kind of what we're talking about. Perimenopause can start 2 to 8 plus years before the actual day of menopause. So let's talk a little bit. I'm referencing the blog, so that has all the extended notes on here if you want to check that out. But like I said, the perimenopause and menopause symptoms can be low libido, night sweats, hot flashes. Obviously the periods get irregular and then go away. Insomnia and sleep disturbances, vaginal dryness and discomfort, and that brain fog, fatigue, and low energy. And then when we talk about the first phase of perimenopause, which is estrogen dominance, or can be present estrogen dominance, I've already defined that, but how that can relate, that can feel very much like a roller coaster because the hormones are very up and down. So sometimes it's hard to differentiate between that and maybe your cortisol roller coastering from having a stressful life or having trauma and that building up. So those can kind of overlap. And one test I find super helpful to help determine if one or both of those are going on and if other situations are going on with your female hormones is the Dutch test. So that's a urine test. I'll put a link in the description. I have videos on this. I have blogs on this. I use it a lot in my practice. It's, a pricier kind of functional medicine test, but it gives us all this information, helps us determine what is contributing. You can even have testosterone factor into this too, because women do need testosterone. So what is cortisol? So cortisol is a hormone released by the adrenal glands in response to stress. It's one of our stress hormones, plays a big role in a lot of different functions in helping to control our resilience to stress, helps, it's part of fight or flight, helps control or relates to our blood sugar levels, helps our metabolism and energy production, helps blood pressure, reduces inflammation, helps support the immune system. So it's very important, and we really want it to be balanced. So if you don't have balanced cortisol, you can have a poor immune function. You can have your sleep be very interrupted. You can feel super fatigued, particularly after exercise or activity. You can have that brain fog we talked about, insulin resistance, and weight gain. So again, these are all reasons why we want to look at our cortisol and help to balance it. So how do these two relate? How do estrogen and cortisol relate? So cortisol is, like I said, the stress hormone. It has a lot to do with our hormone balance. High cortisol levels in perimenopause can impact estrogen levels, like by inhibiting the production availability of progesterone. So if you have a lot of your energy going towards that cortisol production, it can take away from our progesterone production. So it can make that estrogen dominance kind of imbalance worse, and that roller coaster of symptoms in phase 1 of our perimenopause worse. So that would make also, it can cause weight gain to be worse, mood swings to be worse, and the periods to be worse. Because stress, as we probably know, if you're a woman watching this, you've probably had stress affect your periods before. So that may be related to cortisol. It could also, that dysregulation between the two and between all the hormone balance that's going on there can cause breast tenderness and bloating and migraines to get worse too, or to be present when they weren't present before. What else am I missing? So there is a connection there, and definitely in that first phase, but also in the second phase of perimenopause, when our estrogen is low and our progesterone is low, we're still potentially creating a gap in those two when we have cortisol imbalance, and cortisol is sucking out, or not necessarily sucking out, that's not a good terminology. Doesn't happen that way, but it's affecting our progesterone levels and making them low, and then our sleep is bad and our estrogen appears higher even though it might not be high, and we have the mood swings and the regular or irregular crazy periods, and maybe even some acne. All those things can come from that imbalance between all of these hormones. So how do we work on balanced cortisol? It's similar to what I was talking about last week in working on lifestyle changes to support mental clarity and reduce brain fog, but really with a big focus on stress management, mindfulness, maybe going to a therapist for cognitive behavioral therapy, meditation, deep breathing. I always mention the Aura app. I like that, and the Calm app for meditation. Even they have hypnosis on the Aura app. They have manifesting, which some people really like instead of meditation, but kind of bringing that mindfulness piece into there. Mindfulness doesn't have to be that. It can be as simple as, going outside, enjoying nature, checking out from your phone, from your computer, from the TV, from relationships, just going out on your own and having the mind be quiet, maybe just focusing on the leaves, the grass, the changing seasons, the animals you see, the people you see, the color of the sky, simple things like that. There can be a lot of things that can help reduce those cortisol levels. Exercising, so again, like I've talked about in a lot of my hormone balance videos, you don't want to push yourself so hard that it makes your cortisol imbalance worse, because cortisol goes up with any type of exercise that you do. So I'm not saying don't exercise because your cortisol might be high, but doing, exercise in particular that helps with mindfulness, like yoga and Pilates, where you're having that deep breathing and that focused, slow movement, and really focusing on different parts of your body, that can be super beneficial in a lot of different ways for your hormones and for cortisol. Hiking, because you're getting out into nature. Walking at a local park, if you have one, or lake that you can walk at. Getting out into nature, gentle exercise, that helps support the cortisol. Even like cycling or biking. Even if you can't get outside and do it, maybe you have an indoor cycle and you could watch a free cycling video on YouTube where you're just seeing the scenery. Of course, Peloton, if you have that, great. You can do that on there. Swimming is another great way, just you in the water, connecting and moving your body in a slow and rhythmic way. That can help lower cortisol. And then and always when you're trying to lower cortisol and you're not an exerciser and you haven't been exercising regularly, do it slowly, maybe 5 to 10 minutes a day, and get kind of gradually and slowly into it so you don't exhaust and have a roller coaster of your cortisol, because cortisol doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's not always high or always low. You can have highs and lows, and that's why we love the Dutch test, but that's why I love looking at the numbers. But you can have times where you're feeling over adrenalized from those stress hormones and feeling wired, and we call it wired and tired. In functional medicine, you can feel wired and you can feel tired. That's probably a cortisol imbalance, and then that could be making your estrogen imbalance worse. And then even into menopause. So when you get into menopause and your estrogen is dropping and it's low, that even having that cortisol be high or that cortisol be too low or imbalanced can make that fatigue of menopause worse. It can make the night sweats worse. It can make your brain fog worse. So definitely want to work on all of these all together. Definitely eating low in sugar and not overdoing the caffeine. So I usually tell my patients that are working on their cortisol to keep their caffeine to a minimum. So 1 cup of coffee or less, maybe changing to green tea, which is more hormone supportive, changing to half calf, trying to get yourself gradually out of the caffeine addiction so that you don't go through withdrawals, because that on top of menopause and perimenopause is not fun. But focusing on that, and my hair keeps going crazy, focusing on that and lifestyle stuff. Oh, alcohol, I talk about that a lot. So having too much alcohol definitely does a number on your blood sugar and your cortisol. So keeping that to a very, very minimum is great to getting your sleep, 7 to 9 hours of sleep, trying to go to bed. Cortisol, I talk about this a lot with hormone balance, but cortisol and stress hormones love that 7 to 9 hours of good quality sleep, and they love it to be on a rhythm, on a pattern. So trying to get to sleep around the same time every night and waking up around the same time every night. Maybe going to sleep between like 10 and 11 and waking up between 6 and 7. I know I'm repeating myself if you watched last week's video on brain fog, but there's a lot of overlap there. Yeah, we talked about the Dutch test. There's other ways to test your cortisol. Saliva cortisol tests sometimes are a bit cheaper than the Dutch test. And you can get those from various functional medicine companies. You can also do blood cortisol testing through your doctor. It's not the best because it's just like usually one point in time. If you're gonna do that, definitely do it between 7 and 9 in the morning and fasting. And then if it's high, maybe consider doing one of these other tests or just doing these lifestyle changes and seeing if that helps how you're feeling and helps your hormones and your female hormones. So that's kind of it that I can go over in a video, but you can dive deeper into my other videos. I have information about my functional medicine practice in the description. And then I have information about the Dutch test in the description, and I'll put some cortisol supportive supplements that I've used in the past. Mainly, I'll briefly touch on them because they're a small part of the treatment. You really need to focus on lifestyle, diet, sleep, and exercise and mindfulness. But if you did want to touch on those, some things for high cortisol that I like, some blends, and I'll put them in the description. Cortisol Calm, Cortisol Manager are 2 really good ones. And then for imbalanced cortisol, where it can be low and high and you just kind of need that overall toning, I really love HPA Adapt by Integrative Therapeutics. So I'll put some of those in the description. There's individual herbs I like too, and I talked about those like a couple weeks ago in the herbal tea for menopause video that I did. And then I do have a cortisol supplement video, but I know everybody likes the supplement and support video, so I will be going more into those and focusing on individual treatments. So stay tuned for that. But I hope you enjoyed this. Please remember to hit like, subscribe, and to hit the bell notification to be notified when I post new videos. They're usually every other week now, and I post shorts in between. You can follow me on Instagram, and then check out the blog, perimenopause.help. And I really appreciate you being here. Thanks so much. See you next time.